range of topics here. Let's get back to the audience. We have Maureen Morella. She's from West Milford, New Jersey, and she's currently undecided, and she has a really important question. Please.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, governors. Governors, when one of my sons was 16 years old, he went out with some friends and he did a line of heroin. It did not end well for him. He became very sick and vomited. He aspirated and was left with brain damage so severe that now, 12 years later, he remains in a wheelchair with no ability to eat or speak, and he is fed through a tube in his stomach. His dad and I take 100% care of him. He has enough cognitive ability that he goes out with me and speaks at every forum where we are asked to go. A message about not doing drugs. We live in an extremely high-risk society, and this is normal for our children. So, governors, please explain to me how you think that legalizing marijuana straight through to heroin can possibly be a harm reduction forum. It makes no sense to me. And when you go out on the road with me, I can assure you that these young people say, can you people in positions of power please get rid of the drugs? We don't want to lose any more of our siblings or friends.
So, heartbreaking. And we are not espousing the legalization of any drugs outside of marijuana. But what you are pointing out, and this is heartbreaking, but what you're pointing out is that prohibition really is what your son succumbed to. And that is that overdose, and again, speaking specifically, please, just, but overdose. You're a heroin addict, and you're taking heroin, and you take heroin. You take your heroin. Your supplier has now been arrested and put into jail, and now comes a new supplier of heroin. And the new supply of heroin, visually, you're taking the same dose that you've taken before, but it's of a different quality and a different quantity, and it ends up killing you. So. When you look at programs like Zurich, Switzerland, where they have a heroin maintenance program, the idea in Zurich, Switzerland was no more overdose deaths, because you could, as a heroin addict, you could go in, you could get your dose, it would be a free dose, but you wouldn't die of an overdose. You'd have clean needles so that you'd be able to not succumb either to hepatitis C, HIV. The idea was to reduce death, disease, crime, and corruption, and that's what's happened in Zurich, and the citizens of Zurich have re-upped on that program. So I hate to say it, but it's prohibition. It's quality, quantity unknown that kills people.
Governor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Sure.
That is not what I'm asking you. I'm not talking about people that are addicted, and when they go to your pretty little places with the pretty little needles, we're still going to have street people out selling heroin.
Exactly.
Because they're going to get their one dose and it's not enough, so you're keeping people addicted, and you are not curing the fact that it is a sickness, it is an illness, and you are not addressing the young people that are so desensitized to what drugs are doing, and putting more drugs out there desensitizes them further.
We're not advocating the legalization of any drugs, not heroin. But when you look at programs...
I've read literature where you have thought about it, Governor.
But Maureen's referring to you being asked in the past, would the world be better off if all drugs were legal? And you answered yes.
The point being is, when you take a city like Vancouver, which also has the same program for heroin addicts, where they can actually bring in their dose of heroin and have it tested. Is this going to kill me, or is this not going to kill me? We have the best policies in this country to kill heroin addicts. Those are the policies that we have in place. If the government, and I'm not suggesting these kinds of programs on a federal level, but on a local level, if at a local level health departments were to say, look, heroin addicts, you bring in your dose of heroin before you ingest it, and we'll test it as to whether or not it will kill you or not. But Governor, that's my point.
Governor, let's take a moment on this, because it matters. It seems to me that there's an inconsistency here. Either you think drugs should be legalized or not. So let's just get that first, and then we'll get into what the scale of that is.
No drugs legalized outside of marijuana.
So heroin should be illegal.
We don't know how to deal with the legalization of marijuana, but we do, the legalization of heroin, but we do have programs throughout the world that actually are effective in reducing the kind of situation.
So you're saying keep it, the answer to Maureen's question, you're saying keep heroin illegal, but boost the amount of programs that you have to make it safer for addicts.
Reduce. In other words, what we're really concerned with is death, disease, crime, and corruption, and we can have programs to do just that.
But keep the drugs illegal. Governor, please weigh in.
Keep the drugs illegal.
The other trend, which I think is salutary, which is not going to bring back your son's prior status, and I understand that we're not talking about addiction there, but I do think that society is coming to view people who have serious issues with either narcotics or alcohol, that is a public health emergency, and it's not a status crime, which it has been treated as. Again, this is not your son's case, but there's some movement away from incarcerating people for possessory narcotics offenses and treating that as a public health issue. In Massachusetts, for example, women who have substance abuse cases are no longer taken to a criminal prison. They're taken to civil commitment facilities. And that's part of, I think, lessening the pressure all around drugs, which is part of what Gary's talking about in getting them out of the shadows.
Needle exchange programs in states that reduce HIV and hepatitis C. You know, very controversial, but the bottom line is that it saves lives.
Boy, I came out for those when I was governor, and did I get murdered?
Well, because it makes it seem like you're soft on crime.
Right.
When you treat addicts with respect and you deal with treatment, it seems like you're being soft on crime. But just to be very clear for Maureen, and thank you again for sharing what happened in your own family, the baseline is you don't think all drugs should be legal.
No,
you just say
I'm
marijuana.
I'm not advocating such. It's marijuana. And I think the country comes to a quantum leap in understanding by legalizing marijuana, and that drug problems are health issues. They're not criminal justice issues.
Marijuana. A lot of the people online who were getting ready for tonight, they knew that about you.
Sure,
they were like, you know, Johnson, he's the guy who believes in marijuana. He believes it should be legal. But then you said that you stopped taking it 7 weeks ago because you want to be sharp. So you are now in the odd position of coming under scrutiny, not because you took the drug, but now because you've stopped taking the drug. So people are saying, where's the policy consistency?
Well,
where's the consistency of your belief that it can't harm you if you stop taking it because you thought that it would take away your edge?
So first of all, you as an individual, I don't care if you drink yourself silly every night of the week, as long as you don't get behind the wheel of a car, as long as you don't do harm to others. And with regard to marijuana, why should somebody who takes the edge off when it comes to marijuana, why should they not have that same ability as long as they don't do others harm? I haven't had a drink of alcohol in 29 years. My whole life is about health and wellness. And because I stopped using marijuana, look, I've gone years without consuming sugar or caffeine. I have the ability to do that. I made a personal decision. I don't want to in any way disparage someone who does use marijuana or does use alcohol and finds benefit from that. So like I say, this is my own life. These are the decisions I've made. I don't want to make a value judgment here on others. I think others should be entitled to live their lives as they see fit, and this is a real libertarian principle here. Look, when it comes to choices in your own life, you should be able to make those choices as long as you're not doing harm to others.
Let's go to Jeremiah Wegner. He's a student